to the strength of the Benko Gambit accepted, most top players prefer to find some way to decline the gambit. In the past few years, several dangerous systems have been developed, and black must be on the ball if he wants to emerge with a good game. After 1 d4, knight f6, 2 c4, c5, 3 d5, b5, I'll first consider the variations where white plays 4 knight f3. We then move on with 4 c takes b5, a6, to consider the trendy variation with 5 f3. After that, we'll be looking at the moves 5 e3, followed by the Zaitsev variation, that's 5 knight c3, and finally another topical move, 5 b6. At the end of all this, I'll consider a few odds and ends to complete the options at white's disposal. Here is the position after black's third move, b5, and white may now try 4 knight f3, declining the gambit. 10 years ago this method was extremely popular with the Grandmaster fraternity. It's less seen nowadays, but black must still be vigilant. White finds a sensible developing move, and if black takes on c4 now, b takes c4, white plays knight c3, getting on with development and threatening e4. I don't feel that black should be as cooperative as that, and I've decided that black's best move after knight f3 is probably the advance b5 to b4. Now this does a number of things, but by and large the most important thing that it does is to stop white's knight from coming out to its optimum square c3. Black's plan, roughly speaking, is d6, g6, bishop g7 and castles in typical Benko Gambit style, when he has a number of plans at his disposal. One plan might be just to punt the a pawn down the board, a5, a4, a3. Of course no white player should allow such an advance, but I have seen it happen. Another black plan is to block the centre with e5, and then to actually get a kingside attack going with knight h5 or knight e8, followed by the advance of the f-pawn. It looks more like a King's Indian than a Benko. In each case, the pawn at b4 fulfills a valuable function. It drives a wedge into white's position, and white must try and break up black's pressure on the queen side if he wants to get a decent game. One of the most disruptive things that white can play in this position is 5 a3. We'll now follow the game Peterson versus Albert, New York City 1985, when black just got on with development, ignoring the fact that white was attacking b4 by playing g6. I like this move, it's logical and it's easy to play. White takes on b4, a takes b4, and black just recaptures, c takes b4. Peterson played knight bd2, bishop g7, e4, and black castled. Now obviously this is very provocative play by black, because black is actually allowing white to advance his e-pawn, that's e4, e5. Peterson declined this offer because he probably felt that after knight e8, followed by d6, white was in severe danger of getting overextended. And that's perhaps the biggest danger that faces white in this variation, the danger of overextension. Another move along the same lines as e5 is the move c5. But I don't trust that sort of move. I tell you why, because white's getting further and further behind in development. It follows, if black is ahead in development, then he should open up the game. And the right way to do this is to play 9 e6. Putting white's centre under tremendous pressure. Now actually Margir Pettersson from Iceland is a tremendous positional player, I know him well, and he wouldn't choose e5 or c5 intuitively, because he would know that they were overextending, overtaxing white's position. This is why he chose a natural developing move, bishop d3. And there doesn't indeed seem much wrong with that move. But funnily enough, white soon got into trouble. Black played d6. White castled. And black played bishop g4. White played queen a4. And black played a5. Now the problem for white is that black actually threatens the following manoeuvre: knight b8 to d7 and then knight c5, gaining time and putting the knight on a wonderful square. So white must fight against that plan. This explains why Peterson tries to disrupt the position with e5. But again, he's overextending his position. Albert played knight fd7, e6. All the time white was afraid of a knight coming to c5. Albert took the pawn, f takes e6, d takes e6, knight c5. There's only one move now, queen c2, protecting the bishop. Black played bishop takes e6, knight g5, and then bishop f5. Completed the rout. In this position, black is just simply winning. Better pieces, pawn up, threat, knight c6 to d4. A second alternative for white after b4 is knight b d2. This has a number of virtues, the main one being that white doesn't commit himself to any given plan. He may play e2, e4. He may just develop quietly with g3, bishop g2 and castles on the king side. He may try to crack black's position in the familiar way by playing a3. We don't know yet, and so black has to find a good response to this move. I recommend the move d6. And then there are two lines. White could play a3 immediately. Patrick Wolf, after this move, recommends the following idea. B takes a3, rook takes a3, and then simple play with g6. White plays g3, bishop g7, bishop g2, castles, white castles, and then the final Wolf recommendation, knight a6, planning knight b4, and he says that black has a fully playable game here. I tend to agree. Again, you can see the pressure mounting at some point in the middle game against the b2 pawn. We pick up the position after knight bd2, and black responds d6. A major move here for white is the central advance e4. Again, I feel black should respond with a fianchetto the king bishop is by far the simplest method. g6. White plays b3, bishop g7, bishop b2. Now if white plays this way, he's trying to neutralise black's fianchetto bishop. He doesn't know yet whether he wants to play a3 or not. That can wait. The main priority is to neutralise the bishop on g7. Again, black has a perfectly reasonable position, and we're going to follow the game Aximov, Plaskett, Sochi 1984. Black castled. White played queen c2. And then quite a good method for black against this neutralising system is to play e5. And this is what Jim Plaskett played. If white wants to make a real fight of it here, he has to play bishop d3 or g3. In either case, in this blocked position, black should probably respond with a knight move from f6, knight to g4, or knight to h5, and follow up with a quick f5. Obviously the game's interesting, it's difficult to call, but I believe that black gets a good position this way. But Agzamov didn't play either of those moves. He panicked, I think, and took on e6 en passant. Plaskett played bishop takes e6, and only now did white play g3, hoping to create some pressure on the long diagonal. Plaskett frustrated these designs easily enough by playing knight c6. The bishop went to g2, and now Plaskett played a very strong move, bishop to g4. Now in this position black has the edge. He plans to occupy the d4 square at some point with a knight, and it's difficult to see white being able to find the time for a manoeuvre like knight f1 to e3 to d5. That's white's corresponding method of getting counterplay, but it takes an awful long time. Agzamov Plaskett continued castles, knight d7, h3, bishop takes f3, knight takes f3, bishop takes b2, queen takes b2. Now another strong positional move, knight d to e5. Well, what's white to do here? If he exchanges on e5, knight takes e5, black takes back with the pawn, and white's bishop on g2 is dead wood once the black knight appears on d4. If he doesn't take on e5, he has the choice of allowing black to take on f3, followed by a knight appearance on d4 again, or he can play as Agzamov did, the knight retreat to e1, but once again this gives black the opportunity to play the nice move, knight d4. To just show you how black keeps the edge in this type of position, we go on. White played f4, black played knight ec6, white played knight d3, Plaskett played a5, the rook went to d1, rook a d1, and black played a4. So you can see black has some sort of advantage in this position. Difficult to say how big. I would say probably pretty big, because there's some sort of penetration here on the a file, for instance with a takes b3, a takes b3, and then a move like rook a3, keeping the pressure on white. Perhaps white's most incisive fifth move is bishop g5. Black shouldn't be too worried by the threat of bishop takes knight, and should proceed with the normal move d6. If now white goes on with his plan and plays bishop takes f6, then I think e takes f6 gives black control of many key squares. For instance, if black follows up with g6, bishop g7 and f5, he gets a wonderful diagonal for his bishop. And look how the pawns on the queen side, the one on b4, the one on c5, they support the bishop. So I don't think black should be too worried about that threat of bishop takes knight. Let it happen. This is why white has generally preferred knight bd2 here, and black should play g6 in reply. Now two lines. Visor Plaskett, Sochi 1984, continued 7h3. That's a very weird move. Plaskett replied bishop g7, white played e4, black castled, white played bishop d3, knight bd7, Queen c2, and now came the move a5. So we see this common idea of black pushing pawns down on the queen side to gain space. Okay, Weiser overreacted. He tried to block the queen side with a4. But now black showed that there's more to his position than just play on the queen side. Plaskett played e6. White castled, and then black hit the bishop with h6. Weiser played bishop e3, and black played rook e8. Rook fe1, and now rook to a7. Now that might seem a very funny move, but let's give black two moves. The knight on d7 moves, let's say, to b6, and then suddenly the rook on a7 can swing into the game over to e7. I think that's the essence of black's idea. After rook a7, white played rook e2, and now black played a nice move, knight h5. The main idea behind the move is to be able to play knight e5, not only making space for the rook on a7 to swing across to e7, but if white were to exchange the knight, knight takes e5, bishop takes e5, to control the square f4. For instance, knight f4, or maybe even bishop f4, followed by a lock-up with e5, and then maybe f5 at some point. If white tries to take the pawn on h6 at some point with bishop takes h6, then I think black can play a cunning move g5 and follow up with queen f6, for instance, trapping the bishop. Rather than h3, I think the most critical test of black's setup involves the move e4. Black continues as normal. Bishop g7, bishop d3, and black castles. So it's all very similar to the game Weiser Plaskett, except white hasn't wasted time on h3. Now white could castle, but the most incisive move, I think, is a3 here. Now you have to be pretty careful in this position, because if black now plays a5, which looks the obvious move, then a takes b4, c takes b4, knight b3 leads to an advantage for white. Therefore, I recommend the improvement 9 knight a6, avoiding any compromised pawn structures on the queen side. Here black is fully in the game, and he will play rook to b8 at some point, getting his usual pressure along the b file. If white takes on b4, opening up his own rook, then black takes back with the knight. Back on white's ninth move, he could consider castles in place of a3. Again, black can continue with a5, and if queen c2, then the blocking move e5 is good. The game Gulko Dmitry Gurevich, US Open 1986, now continued. 11 a3, knight a6, 12 knight b3. When Gulko recommended, h6 was good for black. For instance, 13 bishop d2, a4, knight c1, b3, queen d1, and then black plays either knight to h5 or, perhaps better, knight to h7, in both cases threatening to play f5 f5. Here the block position tends to favour black. He's got attacking chances on the king side and more space. Enough reason to consider this variation unpromising for white. You'll notice that most of the references I've used in this particular section of the video are quite old, 6 or 7 years old, and believe me, that's old by modern theoretical standards. And that's because I couldn't find many modern games, i.e. in the last couple of years, with this system. Top white players seem to have discarded 4 knight f3 as a winning attempt, maybe because of this move b4.
This is Grandmaster Damian Lemos here for OnlineChessLessons.net. First of all, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you would like to receive more free chess videos from us, you can just click the subscribe button below. I would also highly recommend signing up for my free mail course, the 10 Grandmaster Secrets to Dominate Chess. During this exclusive course from OnlineChessLessons.net, I'll share with you my own Grandmaster shortcuts to effective attacking, defending, and growth hacks to improving your chess without complicated books or memorization. So sign up by clicking the sidebar on the right, and I know you won't be disappointed. Once more, this is Damian for OnlineChessLessons.net, and I'll see you in my videos. Thank you.